This promise from Robert Blaha on immigration sounds pretty straightforward, but it isn't. In his first 6-year term, he says,
if we haven't done something about our border and cut illegal immigration by 50%, I'll come home.
Leaving aside that he would only be one of 535 voting members of Congress, there's a bigger problem with this promise. As of today, it's unverifiable. That's because there's no consistent way to measure what Blaha promises to cut. Blaha says he will cut in half the number of people who make it into the country illegally each year. We asked him how to measure that in last week's debate.
Our statistics are actually government statistics. They're not our statistics. They're published in every major magazine.
Actually, there isn't a government statistic, something Blaha now admits. Instead, he says he's relying on the Pew Research Center, which uses its own formula on a government survey to come up with an estimate. Pew figures roughly 350,000 people per year entered the country illegally between 2009 and 2014. Blaha says he's happy to be held to this figure and try to cut the number in half, but there's no set schedule when these numbers come out, and they generally use averages of several years at a time. Pew told me today, quote, "We do not publish an annual figure on this." I asked Blaha again this afternoon if we can be sure there is a way for voters to hold him to his promise.
Can you promise the voters there will be a number in the last year of your first term?
I would say that the answer to that is highly likely.
That is not a yes. Blaha says he's going to push for better statistics, hopefully an official government number. Researchers told us that's very hard to do because you're trying to measure people who don't want to be found. Bottom line, Blaha is making a promise and hoping someday there will be a way to measure whether he lived up to it. It's up to Colorado Republicans to decide whether they can trust that or consider this to be an empty promise. With your truth test, Brandon Rittiman, 9 News.
And who says politics is boring? Especially when strippers are involved. A hot congressional race just got hotter. Politics guy Brandon Rittiman has this zesty truth test.
What's Morgan Carroll thinking? Welfare for lap dances?
Well, if that one's not an attention-grabbing political ad, I just don't know what is. This one comes from national Republicans trying to help Mike Coffman hold on to his seat in Congress. And this line of attack comes from a vote by Democratic challenger Morgan Carroll in the state Senate last year.
Carroll voted to allow welfare recipients to use your tax dollars at ATMs at strip clubs and pot dispensaries.
This is true, but it also needs a little bit more context. You might hear this and think that Carroll voted to change the law to allow welfare cards to be used in pot shops and strip clubs. She didn't do that. What she did was vote against a bill to ban using those cards in those places. In other words, to keep state law as it was. That does put her on the side of the issue the ad says she's on, making this a fair claim. The ad tries to build a broader theme off of that vote.
Politicians waste lots of money. Morgan Carroll is one of the worst.
And this is where it becomes a stretch. It's a stretch to say that Carroll's vote against this law amounts to a waste of taxpayer money. The bill didn't save the state a dime, and it also did nothing to change the fact that welfare benefits can still be withdrawn from ATMs as cash, which means you can still go to an ATM at a gas station, pull out all your cash, and spend it on anything you want, even in a pot shop or a strip club across the street. That was a point that opponents like Carroll repeatedly made when this bill was up for debate. Supporters of the bill argued we shouldn't make it any more convenient for welfare recipients to use their money in those businesses. Bottom line, Carroll's vote on this bill is fair game. She had a chance to make it harder to pull out welfare money in pot shops and strip clubs, and she voted against that. But the ad tries to stretch that into a message about wasteful spending when the vote in question wouldn't have changed the amount of money being spent or the ways in which people could spend it. With your truth test, I'm Brandon Rittiman.
Like most stories, it's just not as much fun when you have to stick to what's true. Although the search history on Brandon Rittiman's work laptop now includes asking Google, how much does a lap dance cost? That presumably is not in the research that Brandon has compiled for this and all of his truth tests. You can see that in the truth test section at 9news.com. Republican Congressman Mike Coffman just can't shake Donald Trump. He denounced him, says he won't vote for him, but the airwaves are plastered with Democrats' ads trying to convince you that Coffman and Trump are tight. Here's politics guy Brandon Rittiman with the truth test.
Coffman now says he won't vote for Trump, can't support him for president. But this ad from national Democrats puts the two on screen together.
Donald Trump and Congressman Coffman would punish women.
This is misleading. The ad is all about abortion, and it's true that both men on screen want to curb abortion by changing the law. But Donald Trump is the only one who's actually embraced the idea that women who get abortions ought to be punished.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
Trump later walked this back, saying doctors should be punished if abortion is outlawed, not the women who get abortions. The point is, Kaufman has never expressed the view that women should be punished for getting abortions, and that's what the ad is trying to make you believe. He has taken votes to curb abortion and has been on record against abortion being legal. Pro-choice advocates would argue that is punishment, but this ad went beyond whether abortion ought to be legal. It goes on to attack Kaufman with a line we've heard before.
And Kaufman tried to redefine rape to mean only forcible rape. In Kaufman's bill, victims who were drugged, even minors, victims of statutory rape, would not be considered rape victims.
This needs context. First of all, we're not talking about changing the definition of the crime rape. Kaufman co-sponsored a bill in the House to ban federal funds from paying for abortions with some exceptions. And it is true, the first draft of that bill made forcible rape one of those exceptions, but not other kinds of rape. In committee, opponents pointed out that wording wouldn't cover all kinds of rape, and so the committee changed the wording to simply make an exception for rape, full stop. Kaufman wasn't on that committee. He voted for the bill after the language was changed. It is fair to point out that Kaufman put his name on a bill that tried to draw a line between forcible rape and other kinds, but that wasn't the bill's main goal, and Kaufman voted for the bill without that language. Bottom line, Kaufman is a pro-life candidate. He has a record that is fair game, but this ad has to stretch beyond that record to portray Kaufman as embracing some of Trump's most extreme comments on the subject. With your truth test, I'm Brandon Rittiman.
Coloradans will vote on tripling our state's cigarette tax, and there's no real plan on how to spend all that money. Or at least that's the claim. From the same folks who told America under oath that nicotine is not addictive. Not saying Big Tobacco's lying again, but I sure want Brandon Rittiman to check it out. You know what I'm saying?
Amendment 72 is expected to bring in almost $1/3 billion a year in new tobacco taxes if it passes, which is more than double what the state makes in tax on recreational marijuana. The goal of this ad is to convince you that there's no solid plan to spend that money.
It's a $315 million tax on tobacco that would lock government grant spending programs deep inside our Constitution, or programs that have yet to be determined. That's not right, especially when we don't even know where much of the money is going.
This is misleading. There is a plan to spend all of the new tax money Amendment 72 would bring in. Your official state voter guide explains the money would go to grants to fund research on tobacco, to help veterans, and to treat addiction in young people, among other things. The ad defends its claim by pointing out that we don't know exactly who would get these grants, and that's true, but that's how grants work. You have to make a pitch for how the money is going to help accomplish something in order to win a grant. The ballot question has legal language that sets the rules for doing that, which brings us to
allowing powerful special interests to misuse our Constitution and our tax dollars.
This is speculation. The ad makers are arguing that the grant programs Amendment 72 would fund will be abused. Obviously, we can't prove that won't happen, but the ad makers can't prove that it will. Amendment 72 would put guardrails in the law aimed at preventing abuse, like posting the grants online so the public can scrutinize who got the money and why. This doesn't affect our verdict, but there is something else you should know. We don't know what powerful special interests might abuse grants to research health issues, but we can tell you exactly what special interests paid for this ad. The No on 72 campaign is funded so far by just one donor, Altria, one of the biggest tobacco companies in the world. You may know it better by its old name, Philip Morris. Bottom line here, this ad is selling a narrative that Amendment 72 will raise lots of money with no plan for spending it. That doesn't ring true. You should study the plan for these taxes and decide whether you like it or not. With your truth test, Brandon Rittiman, 9 News.
And we invite you to dig into the research used in that report. You can check our work. There's a link in Brandon's story on 9news.com.
Donald Trump's campaign is trying to shore up support in Colorado with ads attacking Hillary Clinton's record as Secretary of State. 9 News political reporter Brandon Rittiman has this truth test.
Hillary failed as Secretary of State, and now the world is unraveling.
So that's the theme the Trump campaign wants to build here. As you might suspect, it can be tough to pin an entire administration's problems on one cabinet member, which is where this ad gets into trouble.
Her Russian reset provoked Putin, led to wars in Europe.
This is a stretch. It's true that Hillary Clinton was the face of the Obama administration's reset with Russia. She even brought the reset button, which infamously was misprinted with the Russian word for overload instead of reset. In any event, things seemed to go well at first. Russia started letting U.S. troops pass through its territory to get to Afghanistan. The U.S. scrapped a missile defense system Russia was angry about. There were reports, though, of mistrust in the Russian government shortly after, and things really started to fall apart, though, when Russia went into Crimea. That didn't happen until a full year after Hillary Clinton left office as Secretary of State.
Her bad decisions led to ISIS and horrific terror.
This is misleading. ISIS has roots that go back to the George W. Bush administration and the invasion of Iraq in 2003. It declared itself the Islamic State almost a year and a half after Hillary Clinton left office as Secretary of State. But the bigger point is, to the extent the U.S. could have stopped the rise of ISIS, it would have been with military action in Iraq and Syria. We don't have diplomatic relations with the so-called Islamic State, and Clinton was in charge of diplomacy. The president is in charge of the military. Clinton did speak in support of President Obama's military approach, which is useful for voters to know, but the military decisions were not hers to make, as the ad would have you believe.
Hillary failed. Iran got nuclear access.
This is opinion shared by critics of the Iran nuclear agreement. Clinton worked on that deal and she supports it. We don't know what's going to happen as a result. The deal is an agreement not to make weapons for 10 years, designed to make it take longer for Iran to build a weapon after that, and then has penalties for cheating. Clinton says she'd consider a military response if Iran cheats. It's also worth noting that Iran already had access to nuclear material before the deal.
In Benghazi, Americans died because she did nothing.
This claim is baseless. If you're going to accuse someone of causing deaths, you better be able to prove it. Trump can't. Even the Republican Committee on Benghazi found no wrongdoing on Clinton's part. What you can say is that the people in Benghazi asked for more security features and staff and didn't get all they asked for. Is it possible that giving the mission there everything it wanted for security might have prevented deaths? Yes. Can you prove that it would have? No. Bottom line, Hillary Clinton had a role to play in all the stories this ad brings up, and her positions on these issues are fair game. But the ad stretches the truth and oversimplifies those issues to try to pin all of the blame for them on Hillary Clinton. With your truth test, I'm Brandon Ritterman.
Democrats are attacking Trump with an ad in Colorado that tries to convince you he can't be trusted with nuclear launch codes, but the ad gets a little too radioactive to call it factual. 9 News political reporter Brandon Ritterman has your truth test.
Throughout this ad, you see headlines from newspaper editorials on Trump sharing opinions that he's not fit to command the nation's military. But the ad from pro-Hillary group Priorities USA also uses Trump in his own words that it chops up unfairly.
Who are you consulting with consistently so that you're ready on day one?
I'm speaking with myself, number one.
That's an accurate quote that's fair to air, but it also needs more context. Later in that same answer to MSNBC, Trump made it clear he does consult with other people.
And I listen to a lot of people, I talk to a lot of people, and at the appropriate time I'll tell you who the people are, but I speak to a lot of people. But my primary consultant is myself.
Trump clearly does double down on the sentiment captured in the ad, but you could come away with the idea that he doesn't have any advisors. Then this ad has its meltdown.
This is the Trump theory on war. I'm really good at war. I love war in a certain way. Including with nukes, yes, including with nukes.
This part of the ad is deceptive. By editing Trump's words from two different events out of context, the ad makers make Trump seem like he said he's got a desire to use nukes in war. He said no such thing. The soundbite about nukes was not about the U.S. using nukes. It was about his controversial statement that Japan should be able to have nuclear weapons to defend itself from North Korea. Here it is in context.
And many other countries have nukes. It's not like, gee whiz, nobody has them. So North Korea has nukes. Japan has a problem with that. I mean, they have a big problem with it. Maybe they would, in fact, be better off if they defend themselves from North Korea. Maybe we would be better off. Including with nukes, yes, including with nukes.
And the ad could have talked about why many experts think that Trump's idea is bad, but instead it went for a cheap trick to make you think he likes the idea of using America's nuclear arsenal.
I want to be unpredictable. I'm not going to tell you right now what I'm going to do.
Again, this is out of context. Trump wasn't saying he'd be unpredictable with nukes. He was avoiding a question about whether he would attack Iran as an alternative to President Obama's Iran deal. Bottom line, this ad mashes up genuine quotes from Donald Trump, which are all fair game for debate in context, but the ad is not in context. It uses deceptive editing to scare you into thinking Trump is spoiling for nuclear war. He's said plenty of controversial things so far, but that isn't one. With your truth test, Brandon Ritteman, 9 News.
We will continue to hold political ads accountable for what they say. Check out our past truth tests and links to our research on 9news.com.
In his biggest speech so far, Trump wanted to look more presidential and on point.
I will present the facts plainly and honestly.
Now, make no mistake, Trump is making an argument to the American people, so he selected facts that are friendly to his argument. But on the biggest stage yet, his campaign does seem to have done its homework. Our research team found most of the facts and figures Trump brought up on income and crime are true. But there were a couple that don't give you the full context, like this one about the southern border.
The number of new illegal immigrant families who have crossed the border so far this year already exceeds the entire total from 2015.
This needs more context. First off, this only checks out for the number of families caught at the border. There aren't reliable numbers to show how many people actually make it into the country illegally. Trump makes it sound like there's a surge of people. Another way to spin it is that the Border Patrol did a better job of catching folks, and this number does fluctuate. It's actually a little bit lower than it was 2 years ago. Trump also wanted to convince Hispanic voters that he would be better for them than Democrats.
2 million more Latinos are in poverty today than when President Obama took his oath of office less than 8 years ago.
This is misdirection. The stat is correct. There are more than 2 million more Hispanic Americans in poverty as of the latest report than there were in the year before President Obama took office. But there are also more Hispanic Americans because the population grew. The Hispanic poverty rate barely changed, up only a fraction of a percentage point, which undercuts the point Trump was trying to make there. We're taking this fact-checking operation to Philadelphia next week. Join us each day when we'll dig into what the Democrats have to say. In Cleveland, I'm Brandon Ritteman. Much as we saw with Trump, Clinton's campaign did its homework on most of the claims in her speech, but we did find some spots where Clinton glossed over some meaningful context.
If you believe that we should say no to unfair trade deals, that we should stand up to China, that we should support our steel workers and auto workers and homegrown manufacturers, then join us.
The claim about trade highlights a flip by Clinton. Many in the crowd she spoke to are mad about a trade deal she championed, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. Clinton didn't mention it by name when she said she's against unfair deals, and to be clear, she is now on record against that deal. She now says it doesn't meet her standards. But that's not always how she talked about it. When she pushed for the TPP, she said, quote, "The deal sets the gold standard in trade agreements to open, free, transparent, fair trade." Clinton also talked about continuing the Obama administration's legacy on jobs.
Our economy is so much stronger than when they took office. Nearly 15 million new private sector jobs.
This needs context. That is the gain since jobs bottomed out in the recession more than a year after President Obama took office. The Obama administration has defended using the bigger number before by saying it took time for his policies to work. But strictly speaking, during the Obama presidency, we have 10.6 million more private sector jobs, not 15 million. On the website, you can see our fact checks from each night of both conventions. In Philadelphia, I'm Brandon Ritteman. The political story out of Cruz's speech had to do with his lack of an endorsement for Donald Trump, but he did try to draw a contrast between Republicans and Democrats, especially on the issue of terror.
Theirs is the party that thinks ISIS is a JV team, that responds to the death of Americans at Benghazi by asking, what difference does it make?
The "what difference does it make" quote is misleading, the way Cruz said it. They are words from Hillary Clinton, but she wasn't saying the lives lost in Benghazi didn't matter. As you'll hear in her actual answer, she was saying it doesn't matter what exact event prompted the killers to attack the diplomatic compound there.
But, and the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again, Senator.
Send me a tweet at Brandon Rittiman to let us know what claims you want us to look into. Our team of fact checkers are going to continue working to verify what's being said by all of the big name speakers as the conventions go on. In Cleveland, I'm Brandon Rittiman. In his speech, Bill Clinton told an impressive story about what Hillary did for AIDS treatment in Africa during her time as Secretary of State.
She tripled the number of people with AIDS in 4 countries whose lives are being saved with your tax dollars, most of them in Africa, going from 1.7 million lives to 5.1 million lives, and it didn't cost you any more money. She just bought available, FDA-approved generic drugs, something we need to do for the American people more.
This is misleading. It is true that the AIDS program he's talking about reported it tripled the number of people getting drugs for the disease. However, the claim that Clinton came up with what sounds like a common sense idea to switch to more generic drugs isn't true. We found the State Department's own report shows it ramped up generic drugs 3 years before Clinton took office. By the end of the Bush administration, the program went from using just 16% generic drugs to 89%. Clinton's tenure did push that number even higher, but she didn't cook up this cost-saving method on her own. Bill Clinton built off of that claim.
And that's one reason the approval of the United States was 20 points higher when she left the Secretary of State's office than when she took it.
This is false. We couldn't find anything close to that number, so we asked the Clinton campaign. They pointed us to a Gallup poll showing approval of U.S. leadership went up 20 points, but only in Europe. Bill Clinton never confined his claim to Europe. Worldwide, Gallup had the number up only 12 points in that time. Pew had our favorables down 3, and in Africa, which was the source of Bill Clinton's claim, the number was down by 9. As we did with Republicans, our team will continue working to verify what's being said by Democrats here. In Philadelphia, I'm Brandon Rittiman. Well, of course, we got to start with the claim that's about the devil. This one comes from defeated Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson.
Are we willing to elect someone as president who has as their role model somebody who acknowledges Lucifer?
This attack is a stretch. When he says role model, Carson's talking about Saul Alinsky, a community organizer and author. And in a book about radicals, Alinsky did acknowledge Lucifer as a rebel who, quote, at least won his own kingdom. But Carson tried to ham up the relationship between him and Hillary.
One of her heroes, her mentors, was Saul Alinsky.
Hillary did write a college thesis on him and talked to him for that project. Alinsky even offered her a job, which she turned down. Our team found they corresponded and that Clinton wrote about philosophical differences she had with him. In any case, Clinton doesn't embrace everything he ever wrote, and nowhere does Clinton herself express admiration for Lucifer. But there is a little more to back up this claim from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Why, even she lied about why her parents named her Hillary.
This needs more context. Hillary and Bill Clinton both repeated what she said was a family story, that she was named Hillary after Mount Everest pioneer Sir Edmund Hillary. She was 5 years old, not a newborn, when Sir Edmund became famous by summiting the mountain, so the story never really added up, but it took until 2006 for Clinton to ultimately recant that story. In Cleveland, I'm Brandon Rittiman. The main theme Sanders used was the idea that Donald Trump has to be stopped, and therefore he says his supporters need to get behind Clinton. Our team of researchers checked on some of the more pointed claims Sanders made about Trump as part of that argument.
He does not support raising the federal minimum wage. He believes that states should actually have the right to lower the minimum wage below $7.25.
This needs context. It is true Trump doesn't support the federal minimum wage. In fact, he's on record against the very idea of a federal minimum wage. He wants that decision to be left up to individual states. But to hear Sanders tell it, you might think Trump wants people to be paid less. In fact, Trump has said the opposite.
I don't know how people make it on $7.25 an hour. Now, with that being said, I would like to see an increase of some magnitude, but I'd rather leave it to the states. Let the states decide.
Now, if you made Trump's vision a reality tomorrow, it is possible some states could lower their minimum wages, but that's not what Trump said he wants on this issue.
He believes that climate change is a hoax. No need to address it.
This is fair. Trump has called climate change a hoax many times, but this is one of those issues where Trump has been on both sides, and you can also find a record of him talking about climate change as if it's a serious problem. As we did for the Republicans, we'll be fact-checking all 4 days of the convention here for the Democrats. In Philadelphia, I'm Brandon Ritteman.
9 News political reporter Brandon Ritteman has been working with a team of researchers tonight. And Brandon, there was more than a little back and forth over whether Trump supported the invasion of Iraq in the George W. Bush administration.
Yeah, it's come up on the campaign trail, but it really got ripped open tonight, Adele. And Trump tried to revise his own history on this issue. Trump did express support for the invasion in an interview with radio shock jock Howard Stern in the months just before the war. Trump downplayed and modified what he said back then.
I did an interview with Howard Stern, very lightly, first time anyone's asked me that. I said, very lightly, I don't know, maybe, who knows.
That is false. Trump is erasing the part of his answer where he expressed affirmative support. When asked if he supported the invasion, Trump's exact words were, "Yeah, I guess so," which is a version of yes. Trump is right that it was a soft way of answering, but he's trying to gloss over the fact that he did answer in the affirmative. Trump also said in this debate that he had private conversations with Fox News host Sean Hannity before the invasion, in which he argued against it. The only two people who know whether that's true are Trump and Hannity, and for what it's worth, Hannity said on Twitter tonight that Trump's claim is 100% true. At best, then, it appears Trump was conflicted about the invasion before it happened. At another point in the debate, Hillary Clinton tried to build from the birther story to paint Trump as having a history of hostility toward black people.
Donald started his career back in 1973 being sued by the Justice Department for racial discrimination because he would not rent apartments in one of his developments to African Americans.
This charge by Hillary Clinton needs context, which Trump helpfully provided after she said it. It is true he was president of the Trump firm when the DOJ brought this lawsuit. What Trump said on stage is also true and important context, that this lawsuit was brought against a bunch of companies. It was actually a nationwide suit, and the Trump company settled its part with no admission of wrongdoing. Trump was pressed about his history with the birther movement and again tried to bolster his debunked argument that he successfully finished what Hillary Clinton started, and he pointed to a recent interview with Clinton's 2008 campaign manager, Patty Doyle.
And you can go look it up and you can check it out. And if you look at CNN this past week, Patty Solis Doyle was on Wolf Blitzer saying that this happened.
Not exactly. This is misleading. What Patty Doyle did say on CNN was that neither the campaign nor Hillary Clinton herself started the birther movement, but she did confirm that, quote, a volunteer coordinator did forward an email that promoted the birther conspiracy. Hillary made the decision to immediately let that person go. Now, the pivotal word here is forward. If the person forwarded this early birther conspiracy email, they inherently are not its original author, which means it doesn't support the case that Donald Trump is trying to make on the stage, which he doubled down on, saying that Clinton started this and he finished it by pressuring President Obama to put out his long-form birth certificate. He didn't counter with any sort of explanation of why he continued promoting the birther theory as late as this year, while saying he laid it to rest back in 2011. These are not the only claims we looked into tonight, Adele. You can find a lot more right now on 9news.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you.